Logos is the icon of the Father, and man is the icon of God. We are the image of God.
Dyer wave
3.
Dyer wave
3.
The soul, the spirit of a people. Architecture reflects the soul, the spirit of a people. And so therefore you can see the degeneracy, you can see the degradation and the loss of aesthetics, the loss of the idea of there being harmony, order, symmetry in aesthetics is connected with the loss of a coherent worldview and philosophy. welcome everybody. Hopefully you can hear me good. I was just going crazy today. Part 2. So we're going to keep this one kind of tight. We want it to be brief. We want this one to be accessible. So we're not going to go super deep into a whole bunch of documents. We'll hit on a few here. One of the things that I would point to is if you saw the Sedevacantism stream that I did a couple of years ago, we went really deep into that. And that was about a 3-hour stream. So if you want the fuller approach to the question of what exactly is the full-on Vatican I dogma of the papacy in terms of all the constituent elements and parts, what's the necessary things that are there for the papacy to be the papacy? Typically there's, like most people will think of the issue of infallibility. They'll think of the issue of, the Pope is, the successor to Peter. But really, the Petrine office is essentially 4 components. There's the Peter himself, who lives and presides and judges in the successors. There's the universal primacy doctrine, that there's not any person that he submits to. He's above the councils. He's above even, you could argue, the tradition itself. And so the Pope doesn't... The councils don't judge the Pope judges the councils. The Pope can unilaterally declare dogma. The Pope can unilaterally excommunicate. And that primacy is immediate and divine. It's not mediated by the church. It's not given to him by a council. It's not given later on in time. And that's going to be key. If it's immediate and divino, from the divine, it's not de jure. In other words, it's not by custom, it's not by tradition. It doesn't come from a jury or a body. It's not granted to him by a human court. It is direct, immediate, and divine. Matthew 16, right? That's where it begins, they say. The other 2 constituent elements are that it's the Roman See and it is the exercise of the Roman Pontiff. So all of those things go into the essential components of the office and person of the Pope, right? So it's not merely a collection of doctrines. According to Vatican I, it's the person of Peter exercising, judging in his successors. It is the see in Rome, so it's not another see. It's not 3 sees connected to Rome. It's the see in Rome, and it's the the living personal successor who is the occupant of that throne, and all of those go together. All of those function in a unity, and thus there's no invisible chair of Peter. There's no Petrine office that you can ignore. I'll just have my church here. We don't care what goes on in Rome. None of those work given the Vatican I definitions of the papacy. So the other points that emerge from Vatican I are the ideas that the church can't lose in the Roman Catholic view. The church could never lose, the papacy could never lose any of those constituent elements and fundamental parts. Because if the church were to lose those things, other doctrines would then be compromised, such as the indefectibility of the office of the papacy and thus the office of the church. The unity of the church would be lost and would be affected if the papacy was not there. And so we see then that it's not anything that could be squished into Sedevacantism. It's not anything that could be divorced from what's going on in Rome, because you only in the Roman Catholic system have jurisdiction as a bishop or as a priest in the Roman Catholic scheme. You only have the office of the keys when you're in communion with Rome. And that's not an ethereal made-up Rome. It's not the Rome that you think is traditional. It's the one that's actually over in Rome. And it's actually connected to the living guy sitting in the chair. You would think Roman Catholics know that. You would think, yeah, duh, right? No. I mean, as we see, we looked at some of the basic points that are made in the abridged doctrine of what Vatican I says. And we notice how many places just within a few pages Roman Catholics aren't consistent and they aren't faithful to, typically speaking, the basic principles and points that are made in that brief document. So we will be reading the super chats as I get through these canons. We're going to jump to the canons because I don't want to spend too long on this. And we're going to look a little bit, as I said, at Ott and a little bit at Denzinger. But the main point is that, and that really for the Roman Catholic system after Vatican I, that's the hinge, right? That's the foundation stone of the church, is Peter and his successors. And anyone who had read, as you saw in yesterday's video, right, that even the abridged version knows that you can't pick and choose. So just to kind of pick up where we left off in yesterday's talk, we're going to look at Denzinger. And this should be Denzinger 1683. Let me make sure we got the right ones here. Okay, so we're going to look at 1683, 1792, and 1698. So we note here in this one, and again, Denzinger is dogma, for those that don't know. A lot of these, very few of these Roman Catholics have ever bought this book or read it, literally read it. They've just referenced it, if they've even heard of it. So if you don't know, it's the sources of Catholic dogma, okay? The Vatican cites this book. It's used as a source of dogma. Even though that guru, the Kurgan, didn't know what it was, that doesn't matter, right? While in truth, now this is talking about people who, this is at the time of Vatican I, this is talking about people who think, well, I can just affirm the Roman Catholic doctrines that I think are ex cathedra. I don't have to listen to the other things. And we saw in the EWTN abridged statement that that's not true, but we're going to see even more when we look here. While in truth, we laud these men and do praise because they profess the truth which necessarily arises from their obligation to the Catholic faith. We wish to persuade ourselves that they do not wish to continue the obligation by which Catholic teachers and writers are absolutely bound. Do you hear that? Theologians, SSPX, writers, people out there, you're absolutely bound not only to the decrees which are set forth in the infallible judgment of the church to be believed, see also 1722, and we persuade ourselves also that they do not wish to declare that the perfect adhesion to revealed truths, which they recognize as absolutely necessary to attain true progress in the sciences and to refute errors, could be obtained if faith and obedience were given only to the dogmas expressly defined. This is the very position they say. I'm only bound by the expressly defined dogmas. For even if it were a matter concerning that subjection which is to be manifested by an act of divine faith, nevertheless it would not have to be limited to those matters which have been defined by express decrees of the Ecumenical Councils or the Roman Pontiffs or this see, but would have been extended also to matters which are handed down as divinely revealed by the ordinary teaching power of the church spread throughout the world. In other words, you are also bound to the ordinary teaching authority, and therefore, by universal and common consent, are held to be Catholic theologians to belong to the faith. So if you want to be a Catholic theologian who belongs to the Catholic faith, you are bound by the ordinary teaching, both the universal ordinary and the ordinary that can be fallible. The universal ordinary cannot err. The ordinary can err, but you're still bound to it if you want to be a Catholic theologian. You could privately dissent if you think ordinary teaching is ordinary non-infallible teaching is in error, but you cannot publicly fight against the hierarchs of the church without ceasing to be Catholic and becoming a schismatic. That's what this is saying. Clearly, right there, 100% condemnation of a gigantic portion of the trad approach, which you hear as a mantra on a daily basis. We're only bound by what the Pope himself and the church dogmatically defines. That literally condemns the position that you're only bound by specific dogmatic definitions. That's dogma. Do you understand? It's not that hard. 1698 is the next one. Let's go down to that.
Nor do they, liberal theologians, blush to profess. Now, this is liberalism in the 1800s, right? Openly and publicly the axiom and the principle of heretics, which so many perverse opinions, errors, and rise, for they repeatedly say the ecclesiastic power is not by divine right distinct from and independent from the civil power, and that the distinction and independence of that same could not be preserved without the essential rights of the civil power being invaded and usurped by the church. So this is talking about church and state. And we cannot pass over in silence the boldness of those who, not enduring sound doctrine, contend that without sin, and with no loss of Catholic profession, one can withhold assent and obedience to the judgments and decrees. Does it say just the ex cathedra doctrines? Does it say only the ecumenical councils? Does it say I only have to follow ex cathedra statements and dogmas? No. Judgments and decrees and obedience to said judgments and decrees of the apostolic see, whose object is declared to relate to the general good of the church and its rights and disciplines. Rights and disciplines, provided it does not touch the dogmas of faith or morals. So that's the quote. I'm only bound to give assent and judgment to those things. There is no one who does not see and understand clearly how openly and opposed to Catholic teaching this is, and of the plenary power divinely bestowed on the Roman pontiff by Christ himself. So he does not get his power by the councils, by the church, by anybody other than Christ himself. It's direct to feed, rule, and govern the universal church. Again, the non-Catholic theologians who think they're Catholic, literally exactly what 80-90% of the trads and the conservative Novus Ordos think. You're not sinning and you don't lose your faith, quote, if you withhold assent and obedience to judgments and decrees of the apostolic see that you declare to be not correct, right? If it doesn't touch on the dogmas of faith and morals, I don't have to follow it if I judge it to be wrong. You could literally copy and paste this quote from the liberal theologians of the 1800s, and it would be the very copy-paste phrase that 90% of conservative and traditional Catholics literally repeat. I'm only bound by the Pope's dogmatic statements and infallible statements. I'm not bound to decrees, judgments, disciplines. Yes, you are. And there's one more. 1792. Hopefully everybody can see this, right? Is it legible? Can you read it? So again, the point here is not, you may think, this is just refuting Sedevacantists or SSPX. No. Do you understand that a gigantic portion of the Roman Catholic world now believes that they can disagree with Francis as they will? They don't have to accept the teaching of his encyclicals, which is ordinary teaching. Doesn't matter even if it's ordinary universal or ordinary non-universal. It still comes from the apostolic see with his teaching authority, which is ordinary, which you still owe obedience to, even if you disagree. But if an encyclical expresses the constant teaching of the church, which is totally ambiguous, vague, right? Part of the reason this works is because of the so-called principles that you judge everything by are so vague that they presuppose a standard and a category themselves, right? Which they don't actually give. So this is what allows the Catholics to justify their playing hard and fast with what they have to accept and what they don't have to accept. This is why every different Roman Catholic has a different list, and there is no list of what the actual dogmas are, because this isn't the whole list. This doesn't have canon law in it, and you have to follow canon law, right? The object of faith, further, by defined in Catholic faith, of all those things which must be believed, which are contained in the written word of God tradition, and those proposed by the Church, either in a solemn pronouncement or in her ordinary and universal teaching power, are to be divinely revealed. And that was the quote from Vatican I that we saw earlier. So as we saw in Auctorum Fidei, as we see in these at the time of Vatican I, these three examples, you do not have the right, you do not have the authority, you do not have the ability to pick and choose amongst the various teachings, disciplines, decrees, rites, etc., which things you will accept, even with the delineation between so I'm not going to go into Albrecht. He's a waste of time. That guy is a clown. He doesn't, what he does is, and he's done this multiple times, he just says, okay, we'll set up a debate, and then he yells at you for an hour, calls you a clown, a fraud, knowing that you're not going to want to interact with him. And then when he acts like that, and you're like, all right, I'm done interacting with you, then he says you won't debate. I mean, I've shared the tweets multiple times from 2018, 2019, trying to get this guy to do it, and he just postpones. And he says, I've never postponed. I never postpone. Yeah, okay, whatever. I don't have to waste my time on Albrecht. That guy is not worth anybody's time. So he can debate other people, whatever. Anyway, we see then that it's clear, the main point here is that, again, even if you find within these documents, and notice that the principles of ordinary and universal ordinary don't tell you actually, when you're reading through all the documents, what's what. That becomes something that you have to judge, right? That becomes your judgment. But as a fallible layperson, how do I know that I'm correctly putting into what bin they go, right? As I'm reading through an encyclical and I'm saying, oh, this section looks like this is something that the church has always taught. Well, the church has always taught. That's ambiguous, right? And that assumes that you, as the individual Catholic reading the document, knows that that's what the church has always taught. So it doesn't really tell you anything, these kinds of phrases. So essentially, these are useless criteria because they don't tell you exactly what is and isn't dogma. It then becomes your job, reading through the piles of documents, to put them into the right bin. And that begs the question, because the whole purpose of this was, I'm supposed to be exempted from relying on individual interpretation. Oh, really? Catholics don't do this kind of picking and choosing? Catholics don't rely on their own understanding of the text that they're reading, the papal text? And that's why Albrecht and Ibarra and these people don't know anything about epistemology. They can't answer basic epistemological questions. Even Trent Horn, who's about 10 times better than Albrecht, was confused and couldn't answer these questions. Now, we know Albrecht doesn't know anything about philosophy at all, doesn't know anything about epistemology. And so if Trent, who actually has had some classes in those things, can't answer those questions, do you think any of that clown troupe can answer epistemological questions? No. And that's why Albrecht thinks that Matt Slick won the debate with Father Deacon. I'm not joking. He tweets that Matt Slick, who says that I know that the scriptures are true because I cried when I read them, he thinks that's an epistemic justification. So that's the tier of person that you're dealing with Albrecht. And so, no, I'm not going to waste my time with somebody who, with no philosophical training at all, totally incoherent ideas about what justification even means, and is just a clown. If we're already debating Trent Horn and people at that level and caliber, and Trent lost, why would I waste my time with a goober who has about 1/10 the education of Trent? Honestly, come on. So the point here is that, as is obvious from the criteria, which there are criteria for this, the different levels of dogma in Roman Catholicism, the criteria don't tell you actually, in fact, what the application to these massive piles of dogmas, of books and encyclicals and decrees actually is. So then it becomes you, the individual Catholic theologian, doing the best you can. I've got piles, stacks, and shelves over here. The Roman Catholic shelf, okay? Tons of papal, tons of Vatican II documents and decrees, The 2-volume Tanner Alberigo set on the Ecumenical Councils, thousands of pages. Vatican II itself, 900 pages. Papal encyclicals itself, the set, hundreds of pages, thousands of pages. Within all of those, you're going to find many, many things that qualify as not just ex cathedra, but also universal ordinary and ordinary teaching, which you owe obedience to. Is that not clear from the documents that we've read? Now the individual Catholic is in the same boat as an Orthodox person, and they're in the same boat as a Protestant person. We just have different books we're going through. But you're in no better boat. You're in no epistemically privileged position because you have Pope. Because it doesn't actually tell you, as you're reading through the documents, which sections and teachings in the documents go in which bin. That's up to you. Hope you can figure it out, dude. Good luck. Here is your role-playing game quest map. Good luck. Have fun. Hopefully you can figure it out. Here's your gigantic shelf full of books. Better get to work. So, being the Spurgatron I am, I spent a lot of years on this stupid role-playing quest, LARPing role-playing quest of traditional Roman Catholicism, of winding one's way through all of this nonsense, which was supposed to be ironically avoided and solved via the office of the papacy. Does it look like the office of the papacy solves, just take the section of Francis's papacy. Does that look like it's solving for anyone problems in the church? Or is Francis, in fact, splitting the church, running away all of the Latin Mass fans, all of the traditional fans, all the most diehard Catholics, the Catholics that would be willing to die for Catholicism? He is pushing out of the church. So the very guy who's supposed to be the foundation stone of the church in terms of the living magisterium, yes, the living magisterium. Magisterium isn't just a list of doctrines. It's a living embodiment in the bishops in communion with the Pope. The Pope is the living magisterium par excellence, and thus, via the Vatican I view, he is the judge of tradition. You don't read through the books and tell him when he's not in accord with tradition. He determines what is the correct interpretation of the tradition. And this is what Roman Catholics don't understand, and what none of the goobers over at Reason and Theology understand. And if they'd had a class or two in semiotics or philosophy of signs and symbols, they would know that texts require interpretations. They don't just mean what they say and say what they mean. That's a Protestant view. Protestants think, I just read the Bible and it means what it says, and it says what it means. The Bible don't require interpretation. And what does the Roman Catholic do? He's no different than the Protestant, because he thinks that I just read the papal decrees. All I gotta do is read the papal decrees, Jay. Why can't you just read the papal decrees? That's my Ibarra impression, right? Now, if I start doing Ibarra impressions, this stream is going to be 4 hours, because he do legit talks in 0.5 speed. Perhaps 0.1 speed. 0.2 speed. 0.3. I don't know. So, again, because they always love to go to the practical point, right? The practical point is that the papacy solves all these practical problems of the Protestant world. But in fact, not only does it not do that, it actually compounds things, because now, instead of just reading the book of the Bible, that's the one book. So if I'm Protestant, man, this is the thing I'm trying to decode, right, for my life, to give it meaning and to understand everything. So I've only got a few thousand pages here. Now, if I'm papacy, man, I got to start with just this, which is at least as big as the Bible. And to even understand Denzinger, I'm going to have to read a lot of other books, right? I'm going to have to know a lot about church history. Then I'm going to have to dig into Tanner and Alberigo's 2,000-page history, documents of the Ecumenical Councils, you see. So I want to know the dogmas. Let's show you these. A lot of people don't even know these exist. Okay, this is the decrees of the Ecumenical Councils. Okay, by Tanner and Alberigo. This is the official sort of most scholarly Roman Catholic, right? Like $200-300 set that I bought many years ago. This is volume 1. Volume 1. 700 pages, volume 1. Okay. Volume 2. Volume 2 of Tanner and Alberigo. How many pages is that one? 1,329. Okay. So there's 2,000 pages for ecumenical councils. So now, good luck. Better start to reading. But that's not all you got to read, dude, because guess what? Papal encyclicals are a big deal. And they're up there on the top. I'm not going to get those down. But if you just want to skip, maybe you want to skip past reading all the encyclicals, even though you can't do that because they also contain miles and miles and miles of documents worth of ordinary magisterium, ordinary teaching, which you're also bound by. I mean, I can go get my Leo's encyclicals down, right? I can go get the Popes Against the Modern Error encyclicals, right? But many of those are actually repeated in Denzinger. So just to be nice to you, we could give you the shortcut through Denzinger if you want. So, right, there's 3,000 pages. Let's just take that, right? So let's be nice to you and say, even though you do have to read the papal encyclicals, if you really wanted to be consistent with this position of knowing all of the ordinary teaching, both universal and non-universal. You'd have to read all those things. You have to read the Acts of the Apostolic See. Are you reading it? You better get started. Roman Catholics, if you want to do this consistently, you're going to operate on this principle, you better be reading through these books. Now, as you're reading through these mountains of books here, this whole time, let's say it takes you 2 years to read through, I don't know, these thousands and thousands of pages. We'll say 5,000 pages. And let's say it takes you, I don't know, 2-3 years. Are you sure as you read through these that you understand what you're reading? Don't you have to have kind of a good bit of prior Roman Catholic theology and church history to even understand what's going on in these gigantic books? Well, of course. Okay, so actually you're going to need a lot more time, right? Just to be able to grasp this. So, and by the way, the same would extend to the Protestant too, right? Like, I mean, people that just pick up the Bible, right? They can't understand. And by the way, you can read all these papal documents. Don't you also have to read this one too? Because the papal documents and the church's teachings, what are those? Oh, they're partially interpretations of this, aren't they? So this is the original source document, right? And here's your papal footnotes on that, right? But don't you also kind of have to read some of the church fathers? Oh yeah, but that's another 38 volumes just in the shaft set, right? So you better get to reading, dude. But as the Catholic reads through these, are you seriously going to tell me that he's not interpreting these texts? I mean, this is literally how they act with this. They act like, no, I'm not interpreting it, I'm just reading it. Dude, are you really? I mean, they don't understand what their position entails. Right? It's not just, I just read a few councils and read a few papal dogmas and I've got it figured it out, right? It's all in the bag. The papal teaching is in the midst of all of these vast archives and troves of documents. And for you to know it, unless you magically have osmosis, you're going to have to start reading. It basically is going to require a THD or a PhD to say, I understand Catholic theology. But does Roman Catholicism teach that when you get a PhD or a THD, you're infallible? Oh, no. You're an errant, fallible layperson still. even if you become a priest, even if you teach theology. So the irony of this is that they've completely missed the point and shot themselves in the foot by affirming the classical foundationalist epistemology that is the Roman Catholic epistemology, that I just look at the evidence. This is the approach of Ibarra, right? Just look at the evidence. Just look at church history. What do we see? As if there's not an interpretation of the events and the books and the documents and the liturgy. It's just so inane. It's childish and stupid. So, with that in mind, we understand that this really does not do what it's supposed to do. The whole point of the papacy was the way to resolve these issues, the way to not have the problem of the individual has to reinvent the wheel. But when we come into the last 70 years of Roman Catholicism, post-Vatican II, everything is in chaos. The church is in decline. The church is in a revolution from the top down. Right? I had chili, so I got chili in my teeth. And so the point is just simply that the last 60, 70 years is the greatest testament that the world could ask for to see if this office actually achieves and does what it's supposed to. And so literally every one of those objections of Lofton, of Ibarra about the Orthodox Church, 100-fold comes back on their own head. Because all they do is sit there and say, Orthodox ain't got no way to resolve things. I mean, there was just a schism resolved 2 weeks ago in the news. So how did that occur if there's no way to resolve things? How is it the case, as Ratzinger says, that the Orthodox East has retained the faith for the last 1,000 years? Wait a minute. If we've maintained the faith for the last 1,000 years without the Pope and the office of the Pope, then we don't need the Pope. That's the point, you see. And their whole argument is that we must have the Pope to maintain the faith, to have certainty, to have unity, to have the... How could the Orthodox East maintain the faith without the cornerstone of the faith? It's just ridiculous. And what does Satis Cognitum, which is, of course, one of the famous papal encyclicals about the office of the papacy, what does it say about departing from doctrines? Let's see what Leo XIII says. The practice of the church has always been the same, as is shown in unanimous teaching of the fathers, who were wont to hold outside Catholic communion and alien to the church whoever would recede in the least degree from any point of doctrine proposed by her authoritative magisterium. Epiphanius, Augustine, Theodore drew up long lists of heresies. So did you see that? And then it goes on to say, no one who merely disbelieves in all of these heresies can for that reason call himself a Catholic or himself one. For there maybe arises some new heresy, which is not in this work of ours. And if he holds to one single one of these, he is not a Catholic, quoting St. Augustine. Does that say that I can pick and choose amongst the papal teachings? Now, what did we just read in Denzinger? Denzinger says that you have to believe all of the teachings. What was it, 1689? It said that you can't be, or was it 83? Oh, here's another one. Condemned Proposition 1722. The obligation of Catholic teachers and writers are absolutely bound is restricted only to the matters proposed by the infallible judgment of the church, believed by all the dogmas. Condemned. Do you understand that's a condemned proposition of the modernist? I am only obliged and bound to what is dogmatic and infallible. Condemned. This is the syllabus of errors. Syllabus of errors is in Denzinger, goobers. Now, if I'm not restricted to ex cathedra as a Roman Catholic. And I have to believe everything that's proposed, including ordinary, including disciplinary matters, including the rights and judgments of the church. Then am I a Roman Catholic if I'm condemned by 1722, as 90% of the trads and conservative Novus Ordos are, because they say they don't have to follow Francis's ordinary teaching? Are they Catholics? What does Leo say? The practice of the church, as shown by the unanimous teaching of the fathers, were wont to hold as outside Catholic communion and alien to the church whoever recedes in the least degree from any point of doctrine proposed by the magisterium. And one point of dissent from doctrine makes you not a Catholic. Do you understand? I know some of you Roman Catholics are a little slow. I have to repeat the arguments 10 times sometimes for some of you guys. I know Eric thinks and talks in slow motion. So if you affirm 1722 that you're only bound by what's infallible, as many trads and sedas do, then you're condemned because you deny Dogma 1722. If I deny Dogma 1722 in Denzinger, am I still in the church according to Satis Cognitum? No. It's called ipso facto excommunication. The same penalty for an abrogation, if you know what I mean. In Roman Catholic theology, I don't have to be condemned by an ecumenical council for procuring an ABRO abrogation. And I'm speaking that way because of algorithms. So when this comes up, what do they all say? Well, even if the Pope fell into heresy, or even if somebody's a Catholic that's a heretic, it takes the Ecumenical Council to define it and to excommunicate them. Yeah, does Vatican I say that a Ecumenical Council is above a Pope? That a council can dethrone a Pope? No, it condemns that position. It says that the Pope is superior to all councils. In fact, there is no council without the ratification of the Pope. That's the teaching of Vatican I. Now, there's another encyclical I'm going to spare you. It makes the exact same point as Satis Cognitum, Mystici Corporis of Pius XII. You can go read that if you're really bored. And it basically says the exact same thing, that to cease to be Catholic does not require you to be condemned in writing by a bishop or by the Pope or by an ecumenical council. To cease to be Catholic is to dissent from doctrines in any point. Even one dogma, according to Leo, is enough to remove you from the society of the Catholic Church, because all things divinely revealed and appointed must be believed, and you must submit to the rights, decisions, decrees, and disciplines of the Roman See, including excommunications. So literally the SSPX are in schism by Vatican I's definition. And they lie to themselves and make up things to say that they're not. They think they can judge the Pope. So with that, that's the part two, or that's the last part of what we wanted to talk about in regard to Vatican I and what am I actually bound by? What is the actual Vatican I doctrine in Roman Catholicism? Is it what Ibarra thinks? Is it what Lofton thinks? And we see that the documents make it very clear. Is it what the Sedevacantists think? Is it what the SSPX thinks? It doesn't matter. I'm all of these groups. I'm talking about all of these groups are wrong. Why? Because the system is wrong. Because the problem is Vatican I. And that Vatican I is actually an implementation into the church of European humanism. And if you want to read more on that, you can read St. Justin Popovich's book, Orthodox Faith and Life in Christ, where he has multiple chapters demonstrating, proving, arguing how it is the case that the papacy is not a protector of tradition. It is the essence of autonomous humanism in the church. Now we want to come to the real meat of this here. And the point of tonight's stream was to do a run through in terms of what we saw yesterday and what we see now in Vatican II. Vatican I, regarding what exactly the teaching was, right? So let's remind ourselves in the abridged statement here of what the claim was. You guys can see that, right? Right. For no one can be in doubt indeed that it was known in every age that the most holy blessed Peter, Prince and Head of the Apostles, pillar of faith and foundation of the church, received the keys of the kingdom from the Lord. The Savior redeemed the human race, and that to this day he forever lives and presides and exercises judgment in his successors, the bishops of the Roman See, which he founded and consecrated with his blood. Therefore, so the next argument is premised on 2. Whoever succeeds to that chair is the head of the whole church and is the rock, right? That's the next link in this chain. Now, what they did there was take a section of Ephesus and one of the statements by one of the priests at Ephesus, the legate, and then they took a section out of something that Pope St. Leo said, and they creatively pasted the two together, not to imply that Rome has honor or that Rome was first in the seas. No, because no one disagrees with that. This was creatively pasted together to give the impression that in the councils of Ephesus and Chalcedon, it was the universally known truth that the doctrines of Vatican I are the case. That's what this is implying. Because it goes on to link this chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, of argumentation to the prior argumentation. So it's just sort of, here's a quote from Ephesus and here's a quote from Leo. Let me string them together. And look, here we begin. We can read the Vatican I position here. Now, wait a minute. If Vatican I's view is the case in every age, that's what this is saying, and that Peter's the head of the church, and this is known in all these ages, he's the rock, etc., then we would expect to see that attitude consistent in the councils. Now, again, the point is not to debate, because I have to repeat this. I apologize to the guys that are listening where I have to repeat this stuff, because for the slow boys out there, we got to repeat it again, because they won't listen. And they will say, the first thing they're going to say is, canons and councils aren't infallible. Did I say the canons and the councils are infallible? No, did not make that argument. The argument is that the canons reflect the mind of the church in each of these centuries. And so the canons, not just the dogmatic decrees of the councils, the canons are also important, because those canons tell us the mindset of the church on a host of issues in the church. And thus, because this document is arguing that the Vatican I mindset, attitude, and position was always known in the church in every age. That's the line of argumentation it's making there. We should expect to see that when the church expresses its mind collectively in ecumenical councils. Do we see that? I'm not asking, do we see a place of canonical privilege and honor for the Roman See? That's not what I said. Do we see the Vatican I view in every ecumenical council? Because that's what that says. We should. That's the expectation. They have the burden of proof because of what they claim, that's the expectation in every age. Do we have that? Do we see that? Absolutely not. Every council has multiple canons which do not support that view and in fact directly contradict that view. So it has nothing to do with whether the canons are infallible. The canons simply show and demonstrate the mindset of the church in each of these centuries in the Ecumenical Councils canons. That essentially the entire church in every one of these periods enacts things that contradict and go against the Vatican I view. Do you understand? Roman Catholics, I'm making this really clear as I can. And if you come at me and say that the canons aren't infallible, I'm just going to block you, because I don't know how many times I have to explain this. That's not the argument. The burden of proof was on you guys to demonstrate these hefty claims. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proofs and evidence. So then why is it in each council, in these canons that we're about to read all the way through, we're going to read them. Okay, strap yourselves in, because we just have to do this. Because these people are so lazy, most of them, they're never going to do this. So we're going to do it. You want to be lazy? We'll read them for you. Why are we seeing canons in each of these councils reflecting the mind of the church at that time, directly contrary, contradicting, and making absolutely no sense with the claim that this is the case in all of these ages? And as we're going to see in a moment, many Roman Catholic theologians and scholars at the time of Vatican I, before and after, were well aware of this. So how do they deal with that? Well, as you're going to see from Ludwig Ott, it is a doctrine that evolves and develops. Exactly. Now, wait a minute. How does doctrinal development get us to the outlandish extreme claims of Vatican I? When Vatican I says, no one can indeed be in doubt that in every age, these views of Vatican I were known to be the case. Again, logic, Roman Catholics, you familiar with this? These are mutually exclusive claims. It cannot be the case at the same time that it was universally known in every age that the Vatican I attitude and views are what they are, but it's also something that was unclear and developed on the basis of a lot of implications. I think that's the word that Ott uses, which we'll look at here in a minute. It's phrasing like that, right? Okay, so those are mutually exclusive claims. And this is precisely why you listen to Ibarra. He says, the doctrine of icons is a development. That wasn't in the early church. No, the principle of iconography is in the early church. It is not a development. And in fact, the Seventh Council argues that it was always the truth that the church had forms of iconography. So he's confusing clarifying doctrines, which is the apostolic faith, with it, which is full, complete, and entire, handed down. There's no evolution. We don't need new doctrines. We don't need made up things. The faith is whole and complete, given by the apostles. Is that not obvious? Of course it is. I mean, when the church condemns Nestorianism, is it making up new doctrines? No, it's just clarifying what was already handed down, that the New Testament writers and the apostles and their successors don't teach Nestorianism. It's not a new evolving doctrine. But this is the nonsense that these people have to go to prove papal supremacy. Now, the irony is that the conservatives, supposedly, who wanted to defend ultramontanism and the strong, papal claims of Vatican I, were utilizing the very idea of development that the liberals and modernists would flip on their head. They would be like, wait a minute, you guys can use doctrinal development. Why can't we modernists and liberals use it? I have some of the books of the late 1800s, early 1900s Roman Catholic modernists. And their argument is that, so if doctrine develops, then why can't it develop in the liberal way? And it doesn't work to do the circular argument that, well, the papacy developed so that it could condemn the doctrine of development, like Pacendi and Lamentabili and Morari Vos. Wait a minute. So doctrine develops, and that's where we get the papacy. But the papacy condemns the idea of doctrinal development in Morari Vos, Lamentabili San, and Pacendi Dominici Gracious. What? By the way, if you would hit like and share, be sure and use the Streamlabs link. I forgot to put it in this show, but you can leave a super chat via the Streamlabs link. So as you see there, Jethro put that. Thank you very much, Jethro. He's always good, as well as our awesome mods there to include that link if you want to ask a question. So we'll get to those in a second. But now, again, the refresher, because a lot of people may not even watch yesterday's stream. They may just see this one. Who knows? But this is what is the burden of proof. Now we're going to go to the canons. So let's go to specifically the canons in each council, which pose a problem for this hefty claim, this hefty burden, which they have taken upon themselves by saying that this was true in every age, in every case, and we always knew this was so, and everybody knew it. But, by the way, the Pope just didn't use this power that was there, latent, which could have made a lot of things really easy because everybody believed it and knew it. But, Leo submits his letter to Ephesus to be examined for 5 days to see if it matches up to St. Cyril. But Ibarra, who plagiarized and said that this was ex cathedra and then reversed his position and deleted his stuff calling it ex cathedra, was super quiet about that. Oops. And you wonder why he kind of faded into oblivion and won't talk to Ubi. It's because Ubi humiliated him so many times. And that's why they won't debate Ubi. And so they do the same thing where they scream as they stab you. He cries out. The Scammeri cries out as he stabs you, as he's in pain stabbing you. Yes, and I'm saying Lofton with his samurai katana sword performance art, or I don't know what he's doing. He is the Scammeri. That was a great name for him. So Nicaea, Canon 4, it is by all means desirable. So this is, of course, the First Ecumenical Council. And the canons of Nicaea are very important for just showing that the attitude, obviously, at the First Ecumenical Council certainly does not match up to Vatican I's claims. And remember, what's the contradictory claim here? It is that I lost my Vatican I thing. Where'd it go? People knew this in every age, and it was always the case, right? Remember that. Canon 4, it is by all means desirable that a bishop should be appointed by the bishops of the province. Uh-oh. But if this is difficult because of some pressing necessity on the length of the journey involved, let at least 3 bishops come together and perform the ordination. Where does this say anything about the Pope affirming and confirming all the bishops in the world? Did you know that's the Roman Catholic view, right? In the 2nd millennium, that becomes the norm. So, wait a minute. So it's not necessary. So nobody saw fit to mention a fundamental 2nd millennium principle for Roman Catholicism in the midst of the first most important ecumenical council, which was called by the emperor and not by the Pope. All the ecumenical councils are called by emperors, not by popes, which itself is a testament to the fact that they did not have the Vatican I mindset. But each in their province, the right of the confirming and proceedings belongs to the metropolitan bishop in each province. Does it say with the affirmation of the Bishop of Rome? No. Do you realize that in the Orthodox Church, it still operates this way? The Moscow Patriarchate signs off on who's ordained in his jurisdiction. That's what Canon 4 is saying. Still operating in this way. The Roman Catholic Church innovated and does not do it this way. Bishops must be elected by, as the Seraphim in the Discord wrote a great note. The notes here are from our great apologist, Seraphim. Bishops must be elected by other bishops of the region. No pope is involved. This is contrary to the contemporary Roman Catholic practice, which requires the pope to be responsible for the election of every bishop in the world. He signs it off. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard of Canon 6, if you've heard of anything to do with this stuff. Of course, it is clearly the case that it is affirming that is the custom. It does not mention divine law. It mentions the custom of Egypt, Libya, and Pentapolis to be maintained, according to which the Bishop of Alexandria has authority over these places, and a similar custom it exists with reference to the Bishop of Rome. Do you see that that is comparing the limited jurisdiction of Rome to the limited jurisdiction of Alexandria? Now, what's the Roman Catholic retort to this? Can you guess? Well, they're just assuming that he has the universal primacy. They just don't even see fit to mention it. What was Canon 4? Canon 4 contradicted universal supremacy. So the Roman Catholic argument that Canon 6 presupposes universal supremacy is completely destroyed by Canon 4, because clearly it does not affirm universal supremacy. The jurisdiction of each region is who is involved in the ordination of bishops in that region. And following with that tradition of limited jurisdiction, the traditions, the customs, not divine law, the customs, refer to the comparison of jurisdictions between Rome, Alexandria, and Antioch. Seraphim says, a bishop has jurisdiction over his territory. The defining territories are a custom of the church. The metropolitan of the region must consent to the ordination. Nothing to do with Roman supremacy. Again, Roman Catholics just ignore Canon 4 and act like this exists in a vacuum, and then just assume and say it presupposes the universal supremacy. And then, by the way, Abaris on this said, but it also is a thing that develops, like he says, like icons developed. Wait a minute, Eric. Is it something that's known and presupposed in Canon 6? That's what you said. But then you said it's a thing that evolves. Those are mutually exclusive claims. Let's go to the next Ecumenical Council, Constantinople I, which, as I pointed out many times, we all know, this Hefele admits that this council was convened out of communion with Rome. St. Meletius, who presided at the council, was out of communion with Rome. The council, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, defines not pointless doctrines, the doctrine of the Trinity. Do you understand how important Constantinople I is to the church? It is the council that confirms and ratifies Cappadocian theology of the Trinity, which also refutes Rome in terms of filioque, because the Cappadocians don't teach the filioque, as Szyszynski says. And that means that the ratification of Cappadocian theology at Constantinople I also precludes filioque, because the council's creed, I believe in one God the Father Almighty, is the doctrine of the monarchia of the Father, which means that the monarchia of the Father as the sole cause is not shared by the Son. That's what the Cappadocians say. The Father is the sole cause. If the Father is the sole cause, the Son is not also a sole cause. And so therefore Constantinople I, in amazing providential irony here, the council that confirms the doctrine of the Trinity, basically for the next 1,000 years, it's not debated again significantly until, you could say, the 800s with St. Photius, but really the Middle Ages with Lyons and Florence. The very council that dogmatizes the church's Trinitarian theology, which is not Augustinian, it's Cappadocian, is called out of communion with Rome, occurs out of communion with Rome, closes out of communion with Rome. The saint who presides over it dies out of communion with Rome. And Rome later says, we affirm this council and we accept St. Meletius of Antioch as a saint. That is a contradiction. That is a contradiction. They're always asking for a contradiction. There you go. There's one. Hefele admits that's the case, the great Roman Catholic historian. Now let's look at the canons here, because they're interesting. And remember that most of the time each ecumenical council will say, we are holding this council in unison with the previous council or councils. So they will usually in the first canon refer back to the previous ecumenical councils and canons in many cases, reaffirming what was said before, which means that progressively as the councils stack up, they're also adding on to their regimen of argumentation the arguments made in the previous councils. So, in other words, we agree with all those, restating all the previous anti-Vatican I canons. That's the point I'm trying to make here. So not only is it, the church in this century at this council believes this, we also affirm the canons in the previous councils, and those are the ones that also don't fit with Vatican I. That doubles, triples the argument is the point. Constantinople 381, the bishops are not to go beyond their diocese to churches lying outside of their bounds to bring confusion to the churches, but let the Bishop of Alexandria, according to the canons alone, administer his affairs. The privileges of Antioch, which are mentioned in the canons of Nicaea, to be preserved. Now remember, Rome is not at this council. Rome is not here. So you wonder why, maybe they didn't mention Rome because they knew Rome could do whatever it wanted to. Dude, this council's not had in communion with Rome. So this mentions clearly, again, limitations of jurisdictions, which is exactly the principle of canons 4 and 6 of Nicaea. Not just canon 6, canon 4 and 6. By the way, did canon 6 mention anything to do with Peter? Anything to do with extraordinary claims for Rome? No. Does this canon exclude any of the sees? Remember, what was the claim? In every age. No one can doubt in every age that everybody knew and had this view. Okay. What about so far 2 ecumenical councils? And the second one is the one that dogmatized the Trinity, dude. So it goes on to say that the provinces are limited, and it says, note, bishops are to stay within their own jurisdictions, according to Seraphim's note, lest there be confusion amongst the laity. The reaffirmation of the different regions of their hierarchy, as we said from Nicaea. There's no special mention of Rome being exempted from this, which is contrary to Vatican I, and that's because this council was had out of communion with Rome. Now, Canon 3 is interesting because the council saw fit and believed that they had the power and the authority to enact a canon raising Constantinople to equal status with Old Rome. Old Rome is the See of Rome, Peter See, the doubly apostolic Petrine Pauline See. It's not just Peter in our view. And so they said, let's make Constantinople also having the prerogatives of honor next after Rome. Constantinople is said to be New Rome here, which relates to the dispute over Canon 28 in Chalcedon. But notice that the attitude is a primacy and role of honor accorded by the council. Okay? Prerogative of honor, not unilateral authority, and comparable to, next to Rome. Nobody denies that Old Rome is listed first. But again, the burden of proof was not, is Rome listed first? Right? That's the Roman Catholic sleight of hand. Look, Rome's listed first. Vatican I. No. Vatican I's burden of proof was way heavier than that, dude. It's the claims of Vatican I in the councils, which we know that's not there. That's the point. But now keep in mind Canon 3 there, because what's going to happen at Chalcedon is that, and the Roman Catholics all take this out of context, and they say, aha, Leo rejects Canon 28 of Chalcedon because he believes in Vatican I papal supremacy. He has that mindset. No, that's another lie, or a falsehood, or they're ignorant, because Leo does not reject Canon 28 on the basis of papal primacy. He rejects it on the basis of it not being consistent with his reading of Canon 6. So he thinks that that would displace the customs that gave Alexandria the second position. Leo does not reject Canon 28 of Chalcedon because he just thinks, well, I'm the Pope and I can do that. And guess what? Several centuries later, Rome does accept it. That's the irony, is that they do accept Constantinople as number 2. And that's because these positions in patriarchates are movable positions because they're accorded through canons anyway. They're not from God directly like divine, de divine. They're customs de jure. They're church law. And thus, for example, if a patriarchate apostatizes, they're no longer in the pentarchy or the originally it was three patriarchates at Nicaea, right? If one of them apostatizes, there would only be 2. All right, let's move to Ephesus, Canon 6. If anyone should in any way attempt to set aside the in each case made by the Holy Synod of Ephesus, the Holy Synod decrees that if they be bishops or clergymen, they shall absolutely forfeit their office, and if laymen, they shall be excommunicated. The Holy Synod, as accepted by the Church as ecumenical, has authority even over the faithful. There's no mention here of the canon of the exemption of the Bishop of Rome as someone who could not be excommunicated. Do you understand that if Vatican I is true, the Roman See is indefectible, and you cannot excommunicate a Roman pontiff, because Vatican I says councils are not superior to the Pope. The Pope judges and is superior to the councils. But this canon does not say, well, the councils and the synods can excommunicate anybody, but of course not the Bishop of Rome. Wink, wink, right? And what's the Roman well, they just assumed it. It was argument from silence. Everybody knew it. Everybody knew it, but they're also enacting canons contrary to it. Okay, whatever, dude. Canon 7, when these things have been read, the Holy Synod decreed that it is unlawful for any man to bring forward or to write or compose a different faith as what is laid down by the fathers by the Holy Spirit at Nicaea, but those who shall dare to compose a different creed. And so this is the addition of the Filioque as professed in terms of violation of this canon, right? And this canon is correct, basically speaking, even though the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed eventually also gets accepted. We're not saying that it's always wrong to do this per se, but it becomes wrong after this canon. That's the point, right? So after this canon is enacted, you can't add to the creed, right? Because they'll say, well, Constantinople changed the creed. Canon 8, our brother Bishop Reginus, beloved of God, and his fellow beloved of God bishops, Zeno and Evagrius, the province of Cyprus, have reported to us an innovation which has been introduced contrary to the ecclesiastical canons and constitutions, which the Holy Apostle, which touched on the liberty of the churches of all. Wherefore, some injuries affecting require more attention. And so I'm going to skip down because this is a long one. This deals with Cyprus. Now, the reason Cyprus is important because at Ephesus, Cyprus is accepted as an autocephalous church. Okay. An autocephalous church means that it's not under the jurisdiction of another region that can impose anything upon it. The very idea of an autocephalous church is contrary to the entire Roman Catholic scheme. I'm not talking about uniates and having your own right. That's not what autocephalous does not mean, your own right. It's not just a liturgical practice. It's jurisdictional. Jurisdictional. And notice, there's nothing about, well, it's jurisdictional, it's autocephalous, except if the Bishop of Rome. See, every time it's just, well, but it's assumed that the Pope has the authority over the autocephalous churches. Yeah, nobody talks about that. But it's assumed, you see. And what do they appeal to? Do they say the autocephalous churches are autocephalous because the Pope allows them to be autocephalous? That would be the Vatican I view. That's how the Roman Catholics approach uniatism and the Byzantine Rite. No, it says according to the canons, the ancient canons, the customs, the traditions. There's no mention of Rome in regards to this authority when the church enacted this autocephaly. The canon reaffirms the importance of succession of bishops and their authority over their own jurisdictions. Again, stressing the decentralized nature of the church, the synodality of the church, the collegiality of the church. There's no special mention of Rome having authority over any of the autocephalous jurisdictions. And which of these two churches, Orthodox or Roman Catholic, continues this clear tradition in Ephesus and later councils of autocephaly. Can you guess which one? It's not the Roman Catholic Church. So when we come to Chalcedon, Canon 1, we have judged it right that the canons of the Holy Fathers made in the previous canons and synods until now should remain in force. So notice that it's also affirming these previous councils and canons, which enacted canons contrary to the Vatican I idea and mindset. So Chalcedon is not a council just from the outset affirming the Vatican I view. The point here is that the mindset of the church is collegial and synodal, and Roman Catholics have to then go back to Chalcedon and read into it the Vatican I view. And all they do is pick the little quotes about universal archbishop. That's Vatican I. Did you know that other patriarchates referred to themselves as also universal patriarch? Oh wait, that's the title of the ecumenical patriarch. So if the argument is that the title alone means Vatican I, then Bartholomew is a pope by the title. I mean, this is literally the level of the arguments that they use. Peter has spoken through Leo. Yeah, but if you read Denny, he gives you dozens of quotes where the church fathers say that Peter speaks in all the bishops. So Peter speaking through Leo just simply means that's the Petrine See. Yeah, of course. But Peter also spoke through the other bishops like at Antioch when they taught truth. And when Rome teaches truth, Peter speaks through Rome. But the attitude even at Constantinople III, just like at Chalcedon, is to investigate the letter of the Pope that arrives. For 5 days. When Leo's tome comes, they spend 5 days to see if it aligns with who? Who's the father of Chalcedon? Oh, you thought it was Leo? No. It's Cyril. The council spends 5 days to check Leo's tome to see if it matches up with Cyril's Ephesus theology. That is not the attitude of Vatican I. That is not the attitude of the Pope judges and ratifies the council. That is the reverse view, that the council judges and ratifies and decides if the Pope's teaching is orthodox. Two different views. You see that. And we know what the Vatican I view says, right? Are we clear on this? The Pope is not below the council. No council is above a Pope. No council can tell the Pope what to do. So, first off, with that in mind, remember Chalcedon reaffirms the previous canons of the previous councils that are contrary to Vatican I's mindset. Canon 5, concerning bishops or clergymen who go about from city to city, is decreed that the canons enacted by the Holy Father shall remain in force. The previous canon, the ones that we read about limited jurisdictions. Where is there anything about, except for the universal supremacy and jurisdiction of Rome, which everyone, of course, knows about. Again, they just assumed it. If they knew it and assumed it, then why would they be enacting canons in the previous councils contrary to it? And number two, if they knew it and assumed it, then it can't be something that evolves from being unclear. They knew it and they assumed it. It's an argument from silence. But they didn't know and assume it because it's a doctrine that evolves to become clear 1,800 years later. So remember, the foundation doctrine of the church in the Roman Catholic system is not defined until 1,800 years later. Wouldn't that be the first thing defined? This is ridiculous. Why is there nothing to do with Peter and the Pope in the creed? Wouldn't that be in the creed? How does John Damascus, who's a doctor in the Roman Catholic Church, write an entire systematic theology about what the faith is with nothing to do with Peter, nothing to do with Rome? Concerning bishops or clergymen, so that was the limitation of jurisdiction. Canon 9, if any clergyman has a matter against another clergyman, he will not forsake his bishop and run to the secular courts. Let him lay his matter before his bishop, or let the matter be submitted to a person whom both parties may, with the bishop's consent, select. If he has a complaint against another bishop, let it be decided in the synod of the province. And if a bishop or clergyman has a different synod, have a difference with the metropolitan, he may have recourse to the exarch of the diocese. So this is getting into that model of appeal, appellate structure, appealing. Appellate matters lie within local jurisdictions, working their way up the hierarchy until they reach the throne of Constantinople. Right? Now, in the Roman districts, you have the Sardican canons, right, which do allow for appellate structure to Rome as well. But none of that proves Vatican I, because the Sardican canons actually contradict the claims of Vatican I. They do not claim that the privilege of the appellate structure has anything to do with divine law or the prerogatives and principles of Christ to Peter. It's the appeal of privilege and custom, right? De jure, not de vino. And you can read Denny's chapter on Sardica on that if you want to. Ubi has also dealt with all of these, by the way, in more depth. But if people want to go into the Sardica, which is just a local council. Anyway, if people want to go into those, you can go and look at Ubi's material more in depth on that stuff. Canon 10, it shall not be lawful for a clergyman at the same time enrolled in the churches of two cities. That is, in one church which is first ordained, another in which it is greater, and removed a lust of empty honor. And those who do so shall be honored, shall be returned to their own church in which they were originally ordained, and there they only shall they minister. This is talking about just not going crazy and hopping jurisdictions. After this decree of the Ecumenical Synod, any who shall dare to do these things will be degraded from his rank. Now, this is more enforcement of jurisdictional boundaries. There is no mention, again, of any special exemption for Rome. Canon 12, it has come to our knowledge that certain persons contrary to the laws of the church, having recourse to secular power, again, run to other situations. And then it says, the cities which have already been honored by means of imperial letters with the name of the metropolis, and the bishops in charge of them, shall take the bare title, all metropolis rights being preserved to the true metropolis. In other words, no bishop is allowed to set up two metropolitans in one province, and any bishop who does so loses his rank. There is no exemption for the Pope. And it might be added that in the Roman Catholic world, there are 3 Patriarchs of Antioch. Did you know this? Direct violation of Canon 12. So all the more irony, given the fact that they talk about the problems in the Orthodox ecclesial model, when they literally have 3 Patriarchs of Antioch. Violation of that canon. Wherefore it has come to our attention that in certain provinces canonical synods of bishops are not held, and on this account many ecclesiastical matters which need reformation are neglected. Therefore, according to the canons of the Holy Fathers. Now, wouldn't it be the case, by the way, that if the Vatican I mindset was the case, wouldn't they just consistently say and use the language and the praxis of the Vatican I church or the Roman Catholic system? I mean, wouldn't they just appeal to the Pope? Wouldn't they just say consistently? However, these matters could easily be resolved by an appeal to Rome. Now, remember, Roman Catholics make the argument that Clement in his letters is literally just deciding unilaterally the problems in the church. So they argue that the Vatican I view is in Clement of Rome because he's unilaterally just solving problems throughout the church, everywhere, right? Hundreds of miles away. But then Chalcedon clearly is not using that mindset. And so again, notice the contradictory claims that on the one hand, it was always the case. Clement is unilaterally just ex cathedra, announcing he's not ex cathedra, but he's unilaterally solving problems in the church across the empire. That's Vatican I, proof, got it. But then, because there's all these canons, well, the church didn't have a clear idea for many centuries what the real role of the Bishop of Rome was. And the Bishop of Rome could have all of these powers and not use them. What? I'm not joking. That's literally what he says. And that's literally why this whole religion devolves into papal lawyering. It's just, let me prove to you in these mountains of documents something that I can pull out that says something close to Vatican I. And they can't, but they read into the quotes about primacy of honor, canonical privileges, Vatican I. If you're wondering why I keep doing this, because I have to have this light on the paper so I can read, and this light is super bright. That's why I keep doing this. I wear my sunglasses at night so I can refute the heresies. I should do it like that. The Holy Synod decrees every bishop of his province. So this is talking about synodal matters, and it says, Seraphim's note summarizes, bishops of each individual metropolis is in charge of their own matters. This would have been the perfect time to mention the final decision court of Rome, which Ibarra claims everybody knew, right? Why wouldn't Chalcedon have been the greatest place to make all of these points? I mean, they literally, remember Ibarra, a year or two ago was arguing, 2 years ago, that Leo's tome is ex cathedra, which he then pulled down all of his comments saying that, and never said he was wrong, because those people cannot admit that they were ever wrong. And that's the chief problem that they have. For inasmuch as the certain of the metropolitans, as we have heard, neglect the flocks committed to them, this is Canon 25 of Chalcedon, they delay the ordination of bishops in the Holy Synod, decided that the ordination of bishops shall take place within 3 months. This is, again, just about the ordination of bishops. It talks about ecclesiastical penalties. Note, the election of bishops is up to the metropolitans. There's no mention of the Bishop of Rome signing off on every bishop in the world being affirmed by the Bishop of Rome. And there is no exemption of Rome from ecclesiastical penalties, right? Now, again, remember Vatican I, no man judges the first see. A council cannot depose a pope. The pope is the head of the church. He judges and ratifies councils. Is there any mention of, well, Rome is exempted from any and all ecclesiastical penalties? That's the view of Vatican I. The Holy See cannot defect. The Holy See cannot teach error. Indefectible, infallible. Does it sound like they think that about Rome? Canon 28, from all things the decisions of the Holy Fathers, acknowledging the canons which have just been read, of the 150 bishops, beloved of God, at Constantinople and New Rome, Emperor Theodosius. The Church of Constantinople is New Rome. This is, of course, the disputed canon. We've already mentioned this. And, of course, Roman Catholics always claim, well, this is the canon that Leo rejects this canon because he knows that he's the Pope. No, that is not why Leo rejects the canon. He rejects this canon because he disagrees with the ordering given in Canon 6 of Nicaea. But setting that aside, both Constantinople I and Chalcedon saw fit, because this is hearkening back to Constantinople Canon 3, right? So they are looking back to Constantinople Canon 3, which says that Constantinople is New Rome. Canon 28 of Chalcedon is reaffirming that canon of Constantinople I, saying that Constantinople is second and has the role of honor and equal privileges. So again, privileges, law language, not divine right, privileges, canonical privileges. So the claim was privileges because it was, we'll read Seraphim's note here. Old Rome had privileges because it was the royal city. And there's no mention of a particular charism of infallibility for Peter. Obviously, because Antioch is also the successor of Peter. These equal privileges were also given to Constantinople in this canon because it is the new city of the Imperium. There's no mention of Peter or any divine grace given to the church in Rome. The Archbishop of Constantinople was granted the special authority to ordain bishops in certain dioceses outside of his own. This would have been the perfect place to mention, despite the added prerogatives granted to Constantinople. So remember, their attitude is that Chalcedon believes in Vatican I. They used to say because Leo's tome is ex cathedra. Oh, but Chalcedon also enacted a canon contradicting Vatican I type mindset as well. So that alone is another contradiction they have. There's no way they believed in papal supremacy and infallibility at the same time as enacting a Canon 28 that you guys say is contrary to papal supremacy. I mean, just think how stupid this is, right? But regardless, the rejection of the canon by Leo was not because of anything to do with papacy. It had to do with him complaining that it was unfair to Constantinople I, to Canon 6 of Nicaea. Canon 6 of Nicaea, right, which said that the ordering is Rome, Alexandria, Antioch. And so it's not fair to Alexandria and Antioch to move Constantinople to number 2. That was Leo's argument. Not, I'm the Pope, and I don't like the idea of Constantinople being next to me. And in honor and authority and privilege. And the canon itself shows that that they did not believe in papal supremacy according to the Vatican I mindset. Next, we come to Trullo, and Trullo, of course, is Quinisex Council, and it is later affirmed by the Seventh Ecumenical Council and Pope Hadrian. So, by the way, both Pope Hadrian, it's reaffirmed at Nicaea II, and then later popes say, no, wait a minute, we don't accept everything that's in Trullo. And that's admitted by many Roman Catholic historians and theologians. Some will dispute that, right? They'll say, oh, we never accepted Trullo. We never. But the point here is that there are so many things in Trullo Quinisex, which for Orthodox are part of the Seventh Council and thus ecumenical. It was a gigantic council. There are so many things in it that are contrary to papal supremacy and universal jurisdiction that it's quite obvious why they eventually said, no, we can't accept that one. Right? Get that council out of here. But at one time they did. And there are even Roman Catholic theologians, scholars, and historians who admit that Rome reversed its view of this one. Now, to the Orthodox, that's our view. Of course they reversed because they innovated and changed. And they know that what's expressed in Trullo Quinisex, and as Trullo is affirmed at Nicaea II, expresses the Orthodox ecclesiology, the Orthodox view of the sacraments, married clergy, all of these things that are just obvious and still maintained in the Orthodox Church. Trullo Quinisex is one of the best proofs of all of these things that we're saying. And Trullo, in its first canon, reaffirms all of these previous canons in these previous councils, and thus states that they are enacting things in accord with them, and expands and elucidates even further the limitations of jurisdictions, you see. In other words, there's so many canons that deal with, there are so many canons so explicitly contrary to the Vatican I mindset. That is precisely why eventually, as papalism evolves into papalism, that's one thing we agree with many Roman Catholics. Yes, we agree. Papalism is an evolving doctrine. Absolutely. Yeah, that's really the only way you guys can argue for that, which, by the way, is self-refuting. The very idea that doctrines evolve is self-refuting. They can't make a distinction between clarification and evolving. So, now, as we said, Pope Hadrian, Seventh Council, reaffirms these canons. Canon 1 here, you'll notice it is the reaffirmation of the previous canons, which were all full of limitations of jurisdiction, nothing to do about exemptions for Rome or anything like that. This is kind of long, so I'm not going to read all of the statements of what they're reaffirming. But if you want to, you can just pull up Trullo Quinisex Council, and we'll look down here at Seraphim's note. According to this Canon 1 of Trullo, the heretics were defeated by whatever Rome says. No, by the unanimous acknowledgement of the faithful that was revealed to the church that was synodically anathematized. Did they just Ask Rome. Was it just we appealed to the Roman See, and whatever they anathematized was anathema? That would be the Vatican I attitude. No, none of that. All of the fathers were God-bearing who agreed on these teachings. The city of Constantinople is called God-preserved. The church states that the faith, the writings, and the teaching of the church shall stand firm and remain unsullied until the end of the world. Notice that nothing in here is like the Vatican I statements about how the Roman See preserves the church until the end of the world. So this is, again, contrary to the attitude and dogma of Vatican I, that the foundation stone of the church is the Roman See, which preserves the church and remains in her, keeping her in unity and whatnot until the end of the world. It says there is no canon of the church that had more opportunity to profess the ultramontanist position currently espoused by Rome than this one. This would have been the place to do it. Yet there's nothing like that here, totally absent. Interestingly enough, the Pope has declared Nestorius a heretic before the council was called to judge it, and yet that is not mentioned. That's just referring back to a previous thing. Now my light goes out. Canon 2 of Trullo. It has seemed good to the Holy Council 85 canons received and ratified the Holy Blessed Fathers before us, the Holy Glorious Apostles. And it mentions the previous Ecumenical Councils. We're going to scroll down. Note that this reaffirms the teaching of the Fathers as a whole being dogmatic. A large number of synods and church fathers are listed as being accepted by the synod as authorities. However, there's no mention of Rome as the foundation stone of the church, or any of the Vatican I teachings, or having any special authority over the church, or as being the reasons why these canons and holy teachers are accepted. There's no exemption for the Pope of Rome, or for his not being punished for transgressions or for heresies. In fact, at the next council, Pope Honorius will be condemned, and that condemnation will be reaffirmed at the Seventh Council and will be reaffirmed in the Synodicon of Orthodoxy, which is a product of the Seventh Council. So when Roman Catholics try to say that the Sixth Council didn't actually condemn Honorius, totally false. Total BS. Canon 6. It is the declared apostolic canons that of those who are advanced to the clergy that are unmarried, only lectors and canons are able to marry. Also, while maintaining this, to determine that henceforth it is not lawful for any subdeacon. Now, this is the one that just simply says it explicitly permits married men to become priests. And that's because East and West had married priests. And, of course, you can imagine why Rome simply decides this is no longer the case. So Rome, once again, innovates, just like they get rid of paedo communion. They innovate, which, again, paedo communion was practiced in the East and the West. And then Rome says, no, we're not going to do that anymore. Because Rome innovates. Canon 8. Since we desire that in every point which the teaching has been decreed by the Holy Fathers, we hereby renew the canon which orders the synods of the bishops of each province be held every year, in which the bishop of the metropolis shall deem best. But since, on account of these incursions of barbarians, certain other incidental causes, those who preside over the churches cannot hold synods twice a year, it is right by all means that once a year, on account of the ecclesiastical questions which are likely to arise, the synod of the aforesaid bishops should be holden in every province between Easter and October. This is all synodal, okay? There's no mention of seeking Rome to answer and solve everybody's universal questions in the church, which is the attitude of Vatican I, which is the attitude of the post-first millennium evolving Roman church as it evolves into that, right? That would have been another place for this to all be mentioned. Yet, nothing like that here. Now remember, this is not just some random council. This is affirmed in the Seventh Council. And the Seventh Council, for the Orthodox, produces doctrines and theology about iconography that Rome does not hold. Because it says, we don't do the Lamb. We don't do icons of the Father. Yes, some Orthodox churches violate this. But there's a whole theology of the Seventh Council that Rome does not adhere to, which is the theology of St. Theodore the Studite and St. John Damascus, which is an explicit Christological iconographic theology. Rome gives verbal credence to the Seventh Ecumenical Council, but it does not hold to the canons and the Synodicon of the Seventh Council. Because if it did, they wouldn't have the Sistine Chapel. Okay? That's contrary to the Seventh Council. All right, so, and by the way, by extension, the entire Renaissance art tradition would not be in the churches because it's contrary to the Seventh Ecumenical Council. And if you doubt me on that, read Ouspensky and Losky's book, Theology of the Icon, Volume 2, because there's entire chapters going through how the philosophy and theology of iconography from the Seventh Council is based on what will be Palamite theology. It's the same essence energy doctrine. The energies doctrine is crucial to the argumentation of John Damascus and St. Theodore, who are the theologians of the Seventh Council on icons. That theology of essence energy in terms of iconography is repeated by Palamite theology because the halo above the saints. Did you know icons teach theology? Did you know that in the Middle Ages, the Byzantine theologians would appeal to iconographic theology? Because icons are like visible pictures of the Bible. They're written. So appealing to canonical icons is like an appeal to the Bible. And the very idea of canonical and non-canonical icons is foreign to the Roman Catholic Church. They don't even know what that is because they don't hold to the Seventh Council, only in name. That's the point. And again, another way to show they don't hold to the Seventh Council and they only hold to it in name is that they don't accept Trullo, because Trullo is accepted at the Seventh Council. So anyway, married clergy, paedo communion, all of these things are the norm. Rome innovates and dispenses with all that. We're going to skip down again. So Canon 19. Priests are meant to teach according to the tradition of the universal teaching of the fathers. There's no mention about Rome being the pillar and hinge of orthodoxy and the settler of all matters. Again, if the Vatican I view were the case, then the church in the first millennium should have just operated on the principle of how the church in the second millennium, that's the papal Latin church in the West, operates. But they don't. The church fathers wouldn't have been composing gigantic theological treatises. They would have just been footnoting the popes. And that's why Dullinger was correct when he said that if Vatican I passes, Roman Catholic theology from the time after Vatican I will be nothing but footnotes about debating the Roman papacy. That's it. It will all be papal lawyering. That's what Dullinger said, and that's exactly what it is. What does Ibarra do? Nothing but papal lawyering. That's all he debates. For him, the whole, and that, because that is the religion. The religion is just the Pope. It is just arguing about to what degree and what documents and what boring ass papers from the dude in Rome I have to accept or I can reject. It's another version of Sola Scriptura. It's just more sophisticated with a bunch more boring papers. At least Sola Scriptura, they're just reading the Bible, which is actually interesting. But in the Roman Catholic system, it's thousands of more boring ass pages from the popes and from all of these documents that I have to wade through as a faithful Roman Catholic, which nobody can do. That's the point. It's an exercise in futility to actually try to be a faithful Catholic theologian, mainly because of Vatican II and where it goes. And so Vatican I is not a traditional thing in contrast to Vatican II. Vatican I is a humanist exercise just as much as Vatican II is the logical implication and next phase process of the humanism of Vatican I. That's the right position. That's actually what's going on. But people like classical theists, he thinks Vatican I is traditional. Vatican II might be liberal. I don't know what his view of Vatican II is, but whatever he thinks of Vatican II, right? He's making these arguments that papal supremacy is inherently traditional. No, it's actually inherently liberal. That's the point, because it's backed up by the evolution of doctrine, which is itself a liberal principle. Canon 20, it is not lawful for a bishop to teach publicly in any city that does not belong to him. Oh, wait a minute, except for the exception of the Church of Rome, who teaches the entire church. He's the universal pastor, the infallible teacher of all Christians. Oh, wait a minute, no, nothing like that here. But now remember, Roman Catholics, they just hand-wave this whole council, even though it's accepted at the Seventh Council. And even though Pope Adrian accepted it, they just hand-wave it. Canon 21, there's no exemptions made for the punishment of the Bishop of Rome to be exempted from the canonical penalties and privileges. Now remember, Constantinople VI excommunicates and condemns Pope Honorius. Now, Roman Catholics have zillions of mental gymnastics to tell you why he's not really condemned, he's not really a heretic, blah, 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 blah. But if we just set all of those endless, pointless, dumb arguments aside, listen to the point that I'm making. Whether you think he was or wasn't, the mere fact that the council believes that they have the authority to excommunicate and declare the Pope to be a heretic means that they did not believe in the infallibility and indefectibility of the Roman See. So that's the very council that they will misinterpret the letter of Agatho to try to be Vatican I. Letter of Pope Agatho, that's Vatican I view, ha ha ha. You mean the very council that condemns a pope as a heretic? That's councils above popes, dude. Vatican I says the opposite. Popes are above councils. I'm not interested in disputing whether, it doesn't even matter for the sake of the argument whether Honorius was or was not a heretic. The argument is that the attitude of the council is not Vatican I. And the locus of the burden of proof was on the Roman Catholic to prove that in every age it was known and held. No man can be in doubt in every age. The Petrine Vatican I views are the case. So here we are all the way up into very nuanced canon law and theology. We even have a list of church fathers to be appealed to. And we don't have anything about the exemptions of Rome. We don't have anything about, no, these canons apply to everybody except the Bishop of Rome, of course. And they will argue, yeah, because it was all just presupposed and known. If it was presupposed and known, the same people wouldn't be enacting canons where you argue it was not presupposed and known yet. It was unclear. But it was also presupposed and known. Again, mutually exclusive claims. Canon 25 mentions problems relating to provincial synods. Where is the appeal to Rome as the final arbiter? Canon 32, Holy Fathers at Carthage, about the mixing of the water and the wine. This canon is about the water and the wine in the Eucharist. It reinforces the teaching that the church must serve the sacrament in the manner handed down by the fathers. Bread and water mixed with wine. Bread mixed with wine and water. Which is supposed to signify, by the way, grace and theosis in our theology. Of course, Rome screws up on theosis in terms of their theology. And so no wonder why they don't have the correct administration of the Eucharist. And no wonder why they stopped giving children the Eucharist. Canon 36 reaffirms Chalcedon and reaffirms that Constantinople has equal privileges to Rome. Again, Canon 28, they say, is itself anti-papal supremacy. And yet this is reaffirming Canon 28 of Nicaea, which means that Trullo is anti-papal supremacy, which means that the Seventh Council is anti-papal supremacy because it reaffirms Trullo. Canon 55, City of the Romans. I'm going to skip down to his summaries. You can go read all these. You can read it right there on the screen. The council condemns the practice that had developed the Roman Church against the apostolic canons that councils have authority over any one bishop. So again, synodality. Canon 82 has to do with icons. That there's no, you can't do the lamb. The lamb is canonically forbidden. Of course, Roman Catholics do this all the time. They don't care because, again, demonstrating they don't care about the Seventh Council, because that canon is particularly relevant to the Icon Council in 787. Because again, Trullo is reaffirmed in Nicaea too. Kneeling is not permitted on Sunday because of the resurrection. Every Roman Catholic does kneelers. Canon 2, Nicaea 2, 787. We have the reaffirmation of the previous councils. The faith is completely and eternally unchangeable. Now, notice, remember Ibarra says that iconography is an evolved, developed doctrine that wasn't in the early church, and it's ratified and explained in the Seventh Council because it wasn't there before. The very thing the first canon says is that the tradition of the church is unchangeable and does not evolve. The very opposite of what Ibarra says. The fullness of the faith was given to the apostles, thus it does not develop or evolve. Now you understand that anybody in the first century had the fullness of the faith. And on the Roman Catholic system, that's not possible. Because did they have Vatican I in the 1st century? Did they have Vatican I in the 4th century? Oh, wait, actually, the Roman Catholics say, yes, they did. Oh, but also, no, they didn't because it evolved. The confirmation of what was, let's see, the next one, bishops must be chosen by bishops, nothing to do with the Bishop of Rome in Canon 3, affirming all the bishops in the world. That's another innovation. Next canon is 10, summary. Another canon explained that bishops are meant to stay in their own jurisdictions without a blessing. The canon states that permission must be given by the Bishop of Constantinople for a bishop to serve in another area, not the Bishop of Rome, showing that the authority of the Roman bishop is limited to the West. Exactly. Now, remember, we're going to look at what Roman Catholic theologians today, on the basis of the Chieti document, what do they say? How are we to reconcile the dogmatic formation of Vatican I's universalizing claim with the now publicly admitted historical fact of the regional limitations of the authority of the Bishop of Rome in the 1st millennium? Let's make this bigger. So that's just one guy's opinion. Yeah, but it's his opinion on the basis of the joint statement of the Chieti statement, however you say it. Synodality and primacy during the 1st millennium of the church towards a common understanding of the unity of the church. And the way the argument this guy makes is that the revolutionary statement in this document is that, quote, the Bishop of Rome did not exercise canonical authority over the churches of the East. Do you see that? Wow, right? That's paragraph 19 of the papally approved doctrine. Document on synodality, the Chieti document, a recent document. And even this guy who is trying to explain and give an account of how maybe we could reconcile these things, he says, yes, this is pretty hard to reconcile with Pastor Eternus, right? I mean, yeah, exactly. The Chieti document says the Bishop of Rome did not exercise canonical authority over the churches of the East. In other words, what I'm telling you about the canons is what's admitted here. This Roman See approved document is admitting the limitations of the jurisdictions in all these canons that we've been talking about for the last 2 hours. And this rando Roman Catholic theologian is saying, hey, how do we reconcile? I mean, how does Pastor Eternus, Vatican I, reconcile with the publicly admitted fact? In other words, Vatican I and papalism are contrary to facts, he says. Namely, paragraph 19 of the Chieti document, which says the Bishop of Rome did not exercise canonical authority over the Church of the East. And if you think that's heretical to say that, then you've just said that the Pope is a heretic, because that's a papally approved ecumenical document. So now the Pope has dissented from a doctrine. And what did I already exit out? Yeah. What did Leo say? That if you dissent in one doctrine, you're no longer Catholic? Canon 11. The ecumene ought to be in the episcopal palaces and in the monasteries. And I'm going to summarize that. Privileges that Rome has are granted to the Pope were historically those also the Patriarch of Constantinople in this attitude. The note in the shaft set says among the officials of the Constantinopolitan Church, Codinus is named first as the Grand Ecumenical, the Grand Universal, the Ecumenus, who says holds his power, all the faculties of the Church and all their returns, and is the dispenser of this matter as well as the Patriarch of the Church. Now, that language, would you conclude that means papal supremacy? Of course it doesn't. Nobody believes that. It's an example of flowery grand language that all of these people used in this time period. Multiple patriarchs spoke this way. I mean, this literally reads like a quote papal quote mine, but it's for Constantinople. The point is that it's a perfect example of the language that nobody would believe refers to Vatican I type ideas used by the Patriarch of Constantinople, who nobody believes has Vatican I powers, except that Bartholomew is starting to think that he does, apparently. But yet that phrase there reads just like a papal quote mine. And so it's an example of how they spoke and used language at this time that does not prove Vatican I, you see. So anyway, if you want to yourself go through this, here's this at my site. You can just go look up all these canons. They're well known. I mean, these are the very things that the Chieti document talks about as being the reason why Catholic World Report admits, Dr. Adam DeVille, that how are we going to reconcile the limitation of jurisdictions in the first 1,000 years with the claims of Vatican I? And the document admits Rome did not have canonical authority over the Church of the East. Okay, then Vatican I is not true. I mean, it's not rocket science here. Because Vatican I literally clearly says that the Church has universal canonical authority and jurisdiction. And anybody who wants to challenge that is just a ridiculous person and not worth your time. So, with that, I will give you here again. Did I put the link in there or not? I can't remember if I did. So here is the link to the canons. And we will do super chats. I got to go back and make sure I see everybody's super chat from yesterday too. Okay, so Thelonious asked yesterday, $10. I'm a long time super chatter. Thank you very much. And this is a first time viewer. How did you super chat if you didn't view? That's confusing, dude. That's like papal logic there, but whatever, I'll accept it. I'll be a papist for a moment and accept crazy things that I don't understand, don't make sense. Trad culture preservation, $5. Thank you for being such a light in my life. Your work plus studying cultural anthropology helped me to see through the closed-minded attitude of most super Western culture that prevailed in Catholicism of my birth, stay-based friend. Thank you very much. Of course, every Roman Catholic and convert in our Discord are all sock puppets. They're all fake. So Albrecht has pointed out there is no Discord that has 7,500 people. It's just bots. It's literally all fake. That's what he said. So thank you, bot number 2535692, for pretending to be a convert. Alex, $3. Hey, Jay, you recently mentioned that the natural world points to Christ. Would you mind sharing any books or resources on the matter? Yeah, just read St. Maximus, right? The Doctrine of the Logi. That's the whole point of the Doctrine of the Logi. Well, it's one of the points, not the whole point, but the created world is made on the basis of the Logi, who are the Logos. The many Logi are the one Logos. And the one Logos is present in the many Logi. So just read Ambiguum 7 of St. Maximus is a good place to start with that. Clint, $10. I appreciate your work. Happy New Year. Thank you. Happy New Year. Well, Emmanuel, $10. Seems that most Suds are quick to agree with the eclectic vision of the religions that are all the same view. Right, so they have like a... Suds usually say, all the religions are one, man. And they share some ancient symbolism. Okay, but sharing some symbolisms and things does not mean that they're all the same. Right, that's the quantifier shift fallacy. That's the... what was it from the Garraby paper? The non-transferability of predicates in epistemic and intentional contexts. Isn't that what it is? That you, just because there's a same word used in different contexts in intentional settings doesn't mean that everything is being referred to as the same. And so just, and by extension, the fact that there's commonalities amongst many world religions does not prove that there's one world religion or that they all had the same perennialist type structure or origin. Pano for $3. What's up, Pano? He says, Happy New Year's, Jay. In Greece, there's a saying that, thank God for the Turks, they protected us from the Latins. Catholicism is a slow boy factory. These papal lawyers have atrophied minds due to absolute divine simplicity, or you could say absolute deficiency syndrome. That's another that's another way to do ADS. Completely leveling everything ontologically. Exactly. Into Orthodoxy, $5. Do you know of a historical connection between the imposition of papal infallibility and the rise of fascism? I mean, there's these, there were these accords that were had between who's the declare somebody a saint who killed a bunch of Orthodox people. It begins with a U. The name escapes me, but somebody in the chat will remember that. So yeah, actually there is some connection on that. That I don't know a lot about that though. That's not really my history. Who is it? So it's mentioned in Metropolitan Seraphima Pereas's little letter / book to Pope Francis. It's on the tip of my tongue. What's his name? The Roman Catholic prelate or dude that killed and persecuted. He was one of the fascists that killed a bunch of Orthodox, and then I think Rome sainted him. What's the name? It's on the tip of my tongue. It starts with a U. Utra. No, I can't remember what it is. Anyway, somebody in the chat will know. I'll look back in a minute. I just went blank on this thing. Stepanek, that's it. Thank you, Patrick. Stepanek. I don't know where I got Utrecht. That's weird. Yes. And didn't he relate to that? I think that's right. Yeah. Now, maybe you meant the doctrine of infallibility and not the papal, not the popes, but the doctrine. There probably is some connection. I'd have to think about that more. I don't know. Ustashi, that's it. That's what I was thinking of. Thank you. I went blank for a second. Orthodoxy Chloroquine, excellent work. Here's a question to ask trad Catholics. Did the gates of hell prevail against the doctrinal and liturgical reforms of Vatican II? Yeah, exactly. What does Auctorem Fide say? You cannot reject rites and disciplines, liturgical rites in that case, and disciplines that the Roman See gives. Because the Jansenists did, and the Jansenists were condemned for doing that. So literally the trads are making Jansenist arguments that were condemned in Auctorem Fide. Regardless of whether they say yes or no, the whole of Catholic papal-centric paradigms is thus disproven. Yeah, because it's really hard to argue with the practical facts. Let's see, I'm trying to think, how would a Roman Catholic mentally gymnasticize their way around that one? Did the gates of hell prevail against the liturgical reforms of Vatican II? The documents themselves are not a problem. It's the liberals that are enacting it. Oh, you mean the liberals like the Pope? The Pope who does puppet masses? Yes, Bergoglio did giant puppet masses. Played that many times. $10. Are there any other pagan philosophers aside from Plato and Aristotle who were discussed or referenced in the Church Fathers? Yeah, I mean, tons of them. Stoics, Neoplatonists, Porphyry, Plotinus. I mean, all kinds of philosophers are mentioned in various ways and in various places. And a good book on that, I would say read Pelikan's book on Metamorphosis of Natural Theology in the Cappadocians. So Yaroslav Pelikan's book is a great book showing how the Hellenic view of natural theology gets transformed by the Cappadocians. Again, why there's not natural theology. If anybody read that Pelikan book or had read Meyendorff, they would know the arguments I was going to make. But J Poppy, $20. Thank you for another great stream. I coach jiu-jitsu. If you ever are in the Dallas area, you want to learn how to choke out one of these non-chads, well, I already know just from taking chalk how to do a chalk choke. So if you want to support this show, you want to get based, buff, and be a badass, then you want some chalk. Now, you guys know I'm playing around, right? Because I'm not really I'm a lover, not a fighter. No, really, I do actually want to. I've been thinking about taking some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes. Not because of like I'm actually going to be in the octagon or something, but because there's some things that I might try to do. So basically, there's this thing about a movie role. I don't know if it's true or not. I can't really tell if the guy's being serious, but he had mentioned, well, if you do think you want to try to be in a film, he said you might want to take a jiu-jitsu class because it's like, I don't know, something to do with the role. Anyway, so maybe, I mean, I'm not going to go to Dallas to take jiu-jitsu, but I have been to Dallas, so. But then I also might enter the octagon to fight Sam Hyde and Butterbean at once. Who knows, right? But if you want to avoid the GMO, you want to avoid big soy, you want to avoid the pharma, you want to avoid phytoestrogens, you want to get away from the chemicals and the toxins that are basically in everything, then what you want to do is go over to chalk.com and you want to use the promo code J60, J-A-Y-60, and that will give you 60% off. We're talking about becoming clear-minded, right? So maybe you want to think better. Shilajit's great for that. Ashwagandha. If you have, maybe you want to balance out your mood. You got mood problems, you're swinging up and down in moods, right? You're on your man period. You want to end your man period. You want ashwagandha. That's a good thing for that. Maybe you are a sleepy boy. You're not a slow boy. Maybe you think fast, but you want to be a fast boy. You need Action 2.0. That's going to give you action, energy. Maybe you want to increase that mojo. We all know what we want for the mojo, and that's the Tomcat. And again, these are literally sourced directly from the rainforest. I'm not joking, by the way. I know the Chalk dudes. They're good dudes. They're good bros. He's super strict about his organic policies. And so literally everything is directly sourced from the rainforest. They are a great company that's interested in the info war, in the sense of like getting the truth out there, promoting healthy diet, lifestyle, promoting good content creators, right? I mean, they reached out to me, to beautiful Tristana, right? Divas, e-divas. So they knew what they were doing. So go over there to chalk.com. You can get in, they even have the stacks now, and they cleverly put it with a Q. By the way, I'm a chalk jock, I decided today. Not a shock jock, I'm a chalk jock. Maybe you got jock itch, and maybe you want to get rid of that. Well, I can't promise that. No, I'm just joking. This doesn't have anything to do with jock itch. Don't rub the supplements on your itchy jock. That's not going to do anything. But if you are looking to boost your testosterone, that kind of stuff, then you definitely want to get over to chalk.com, J60, and put in that promo code, and you're going to get 60% off still. Right? So he keeps extending this discount for me and Tristana, and that's good for him to do. I mean, 60% off, that's crazy, dude. You can also set up recurring buys as well. So, but thank you for the jiu-jitsu. Appreciate that. J Mel, $30. Do Catholics have the tradition of phronema as in the Orthodox? No. I mean, phronema means the mindset, so I guess just in a general sense of attaining the Catholic mindset, they would use that terminology. But for example, one thing antithetical to the Orthodox tradition would be the usage of imagination in prayer. And many of the Roman Catholic histrionic women, quote, saints, are all about using your imagination and coming up with all these crazy scenarios, right? Like Alphonsus Liguori has all these sermons where he tells you to picture yourself in the midst of all the terrible torments of hell all the time. So Orthodox theology does not promote the usage of imagination in prayer, and that would be one example of completely different phronema mindsets. So they don't mean what we mean. Hickory Dickory 86, $10. You mentioned that earlier the schism had been healed. I just, if you go to my Twitter, I retweeted Snack, and it was like 2 weeks ago maybe. So I don't remember what day that was. But it was one of those local jurisdictional problems that had been solved somewhere, I think in Eastern Europe. But yeah, go look that up. So, and we were making the point on Twitter that, you know, the Roman Catholics are always like, they can never solve their ecclesial jurisdictional problems, even though we just had one solved. So, Rolf stakes $5. Is there any church fathers, saints that talk about the martyrs outside the Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church? For example, martyrs that were in non-Chalcedonian churches. No, not to my knowledge. Because, you know, by definition, a martyr would most likely be seen as a saint, and a saint is somebody who is joined in some way, even if extraordinarily via God, to the body of the Orthodox Church. That's the only way to be saved for anybody. And if God has extraordinary means by which he can do that, that's possible for God to do that. But I don't know of any that are saints. I mean, in other words, that would be an exception, and we wouldn't know that about them until maybe the eschaton or something, right? But saints are people that have the Orthodox faith. So I would say, kind of by definition, no. Frankie D, $5. Thanks for all the work that you do. I continue to read Papacy and Orthodox by Shasinski. Really good info so far. I'm still reading about Peter as a historical man. What do you think about the different confessions? What do you think about different confessions and Petri mission of each gospel? I'm not sure what you mean. You mean like the way Peter is treated in the Gospels? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that means. Why did the Roman Church have the same reason? Brad, $10. Why did the Roman Church have the same reason that it fell into relative disuse to explain fasting practices and the use of the rosary? I don't understand. So, I mean, if I remember, the Roman Catholic story is that the rosary is delivered to Dominic, right, by Mary. So it wouldn't have fallen out of disuse because it was miraculously, supposedly revealed from Mary to Dominic. Why does it have different fasting practices? Probably because asceticism became something that the Roman Church said was just for monastics. So, you know, the Orthodox Church had the tradition, the older tradition, that no, fasting is for everybody. So, but I think that's what you're getting at in that question. So hopefully that's a sufficient answer. But all right, thank you guys. If you would please hit like and share. Hopefully this was a useful part 2. I mean, hopefully we conveyed the point that Vatican I, it has a tall order, right? That's a big order. That's big claims, right? And given those big claims, we would expect to see not a few quote minds, but consistent, constant conciliar evidence. Do we see that? No. What we see is consistent conciliar evidence to the contrary, which Roman Catholic theology nowadays has admitted, as I showed you in. You can go read the Chieti document itself, right? Sometimes that link doesn't work, so you might have to do a little digging to find the actual statements. But it's actually just paragraph 19, which says that the Roman bishop didn't have canonical authority over the churches of the East in the first millennium. Okay, thank you. So now you've admitted that the Orthodox position is true, and Rome admits that Rome has approved that document. So thank you for admitting that we were right. Cringe emo boomer $5. Do you know where I can find the Go Arch document that speaks about not evangelizing? Yes, that is in what is that book called? I've got it in the other room, and if I go trying to look for it, it'll take me forever to find it. It is the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese Manual, and I think it has a bunch of different chapters by different authors. Here's how you can find that page. If you go to Twitter, no, go to Google and search J. Dyer, Twitter, Greek Orthodox Archdiocese says don't proselytize. And maybe my tweet of that book showing what it says will pop up. But if you want to buy the book, let me look real quick. Maybe that book's for sale. Maybe it's out of print. I don't know, but let me see if I can find it. Maybe should I look on? I should look on Amazon. It'd be the place to find that. Let's try Amazon to see if it comes up. No. So, that's probably out of print. I know how I can find it. Let's see. Maybe this will work. Oh, I found it. There we go. All right. Amazing. I can't believe I found that. So it actually did come up under what I said to search. So it says, dealing with other Christians, the experience. Let me make it bigger. I can't even read this. Because on my screen, it's really, the OBS is tiny. The experience of being subject to massive proselytizing efforts has caused the formulation of a multifaceted policy. First, it has meant that orthodoxy has sought to influence other churches, primarily through the ecumenical movement, to renounce systematic proselytizing programs. First, it has meant that orthodoxy has sought to influence other churches, primarily through the ecumenical movement, quote, to renounce systematic proselytizing programs. Generally accepted in the ecumenical movement, they are not widely practiced. So in other words, it's saying Orthodox were proselytized on, and this has caused the formulation of a multifaceted policy. So that supposedly the Orthodox Church has different policies. First, we have sought to influence other churches through ecumenism to not proselytize. Second, the Orthodox do not themselves proselytize. So it's saying that first, when we adopted ecumenism, which we don't adopt ecumenism, that's false, first of all. Then it goes on to say, we do not practice proselytism in the sense that we do not actively seek to cause the defection of others from non-Orthodox faiths. Are you serious? I mean, total nonsense. Yes, we do. Every church father battled heterodoxy to bring Orthodox back to the faith, and this would be the promotion of indifferentism. So there it is. I pointed this out for years. I don't know. People think I make this up. No, I didn't make it up. I bought that book in 2007, and that kind of stuff was one of the reasons that back in the day I didn't convert. It's because I saw stuff like that. I was like, well, I mean, are you serious? I mean, do you think the church fathers don't convert people out of heresy? You just leave them in their heresy? Yeah, you just stay in your Arian church, bro, because we don't proselytize. It's just ridiculous, right? Anybody who knows anything there's no way you could accept that. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But that is the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese manual. which is not in print apparently because I didn't see it on Amazon. Greek Orthodox Archdiocese Manual.